let's continue this conversation. And I believe we have joining us to discuss the Lithuanian Foreign Minister, Kęstutis Budrys, and he joins me now from Lithuania's capital in Vilnius. Foreign Minister, welcome to the show. I'm hoping that you were able to listen to President Trump there and Prime Minister Starmer. Clearly, both get on well. Prime Minister Starmer trying to push for those guarantees, but it does seem to me, at least from what I heard there, that President Trump is not budging.
We've seen already, first of all, that's a good news that more European leaders are present in Washington and they have talks with President Trump about our common interests and about our common interests into achieving just and sustainable peace in Ukraine. And of course, we understand that during the talks, there is certain dynamics. And during this, I have a hope that the basic principles will be underlined there. And first of all, we have to start from who is who in the overall picture. Russia is an aggressor here, and they started this war of aggression against Ukraine to subjugate the country, and they cannot leave without the accountability of what they did. Ukraine is a victim here, and we cannot question the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine, and we have to talk about the instruments that would allow us to assure the sustainability of the peace. And during these talks, of course, there are different aspects that are raised there, and I wouldn't jump to the conclusion yet.
Right, so not jumping to the conclusion, but, you know, President Trump was asked repeatedly about backstop, other words, US security guarantees. And he said that because of this mineral deal that the US is expected to sign with President Zelensky of Ukraine tomorrow, that would amount to a security guarantee. This is something that, from what I understand, the Europeans want much more of. Would that suffice?
We have to go into the details, talking about the backstop. We're talking about this final guarantor of the peacekeeping, because we need the credible deterrence, first of all, starting with. And we all understand that previous agreements with Russia, be it Minsk I, Minsk II, or in other wars and conflicts, was not the reason for Russia to fulfill those and commit. The signature as the fact, it's not the reason for Russia to implement it. We need the credible deterrence. And for the credible deterrence, we have to have strong Ukrainian armed forces, first of all, and also that for them being backed by additional forces, be it the Europeans on the ground, in the sea, or in the air with the air defense, or be it Americans also with some backstop of this operation. Without it, we cannot talk about the credible system. The agreement on the raw earth materials is the pathway towards the further discussions, and of course it creates the big incentive then for the United States to look for the sustainability of this agreement and protection of its interests. So it's natural that we will have the discussion about the peacekeeping then.
Right. It's an incentive. You're saying it's the first part of the negotiations or conversation, but I didn't hear anywhere there in that 30 minutes anything from President Trump to suggest that he would want any sort of boots on the ground or any sort of security. What, you know, in fact, what he has said is that you will have people working within the minerals, and that he thinks will suffice. We did hear from President Trump talking about President Putin, saying, I think he will keep his word. And what we've heard from President Macron, what we've also heard from Prime Minister Starmer, is trying to warn President Trump about Putin and what that likelihood is. Wanting, of course, a lasting peace, he said, Starmer said, the key to a lasting peace, but also a deal that no one breaches. If there is a ceasefire, but no US backstop, where does this leave Europe, Foreign Minister?
We need some guarantees for sustainability, and that's what we already talked. And I have no illusions about Putin's regime, about their views on their neighbors. We've seen from so many precedents from 1991, from the very fall of Soviet Union, how Russia started wars again and again with different types of aggression against its neighbors. So I have no background or no proof to believe that this time it will be something different. why it has to be. Russia doesn't need peace. They want territories. They want to subjugate the neighboring country, and they are just focused on Ukraine. So for that, of course, we need some credible things there. And for that, we need the strong armed forces of Ukraine. And we need Ukraine within the Western community, and that would work as some deterrence factor. And we need leverages to push Putin to agree with that. Otherwise, appeasements or some other tricks or some shortcuts to the ceasefire is the illusion. It's a trap. And this is our experience from what we've seen. So it's our duty then, as the Europeans and the transatlantic partners, also to convince our American friends not to fall into this path and into this trap.
And it seems that you believe, from I'm just reading between the lines, that you think you can bring eventually President Trump and the Americans back in. But, you know, we've seen very little, we've seen a lot of carrot and very little stick in the conversation between the Russians and the Americans. Of course, no concessions on land, no to Ukraine joining NATO. And we've heard Dmitry Peskov saying that the 4 Ukraine regions that have been occupied and annexed by Russia, which he calls an integral part of Russia, are not negotiable. President Trump again saying today, you know, on the land question for Ukraine, will certainly try, but no clarity here. So I wonder then where that leaves, you know, what you want to see from Europe, because Pete Hegseth, as you well know, when he came to Brussels, he said on the question of Europe, safeguarding European security must be an imperative for European members of NATO. Stark strategic realities prevent the United States of America from being primarily focused on the security of Europe. It seems to me that the status quo has changed. So what does Europe need to do? Putting aside the United States, what does Europe need to do from here on in?
First of all, let me comment on your first part of the question on Ukraine's territorial integrity. It's not questionable. Yeah. That is the very reason that occupation and annexation, illegal annexation of those territories, was the reason for Europe to impose the sanctions against Russia. Until Russia won't leave Europe, Lithuania will be against reducing sanctions against Russia. That is no question about it. Ukraine's sovereignty in all its territory that is in the borders of 1991, first. Second, on what Europe has to do. Europe has to follow what Lithuania is doing and leading by example. We made the decision to strengthen our defense and invest up to 6% starting from next year until 2030, till we will reach the capabilities, our defense capabilities, to the level where we will be able to achieve the results that we see as the very needed to deter Russians together with the troops that are in the region. And this example also we see that is followed by other nations that announce the plans to increase defense, first of all. And it worked as the big wake-up call from US, and we appreciate it. We needed it. It was done previously. It didn't work. Now it's the final time then start to act. Second thing, what we have to do, we have to support Ukraine more. And we have to integrate Ukraine into the Western structures. EU and NATO, we still think that is the fastest and most effective way to defend Ukraine. And we have to act. Yeah. We know all the problems in front of us, defense industry capacities, and there is a lack of that was the huge underinvestment previously. All these problems have the solutions, and those solutions are in front of us, and we have just to take the action. And third thing, and it's really important, we have to continue putting pressure on Russia with sanctions and adding to that frozen assets. We have to use those.
Foreign Minister, I really appreciate you taking the time and being so generous with your time as we talk through these main talking points that we heard there from Prime Minister Starmer and President Trump. Of course, we are expecting a press conference, but your view is so important at this very junction. Thank you very much, sir.